The third incident that we see that Luke writes about calls them the daughters of Jerusalem. Now, as a great multitude followed Christ, this group of women, they were so moved with compassion. They were so broken to see the horrific cruelty that was meted out to Christ, that these women are weeping. These women are crying uncontrollably as Jesus walks by. And what Jesus says to them is what is interesting. These women were filled with compassion for Christ. They were broken for him, and Jesus looked at them and says to them, "Don't weep for me, but weep rather for yourselves and for your children." Now, why did Jesus say such a strange statement to these women? Why didn't he just acknowledge their sympathy? Why didn't he just say, "Yes, I receive your sympathy. I receive what you're giving me, the compassion"? Jesus makes a stark statement, says, "I don't want you weeping for me. I want you to weep for yourself and for your children." What Jesus said at that moment were actually prophetic words that were about to be fulfilled in that day, in that generation. Because before Jesus Christ picked up the cross, as he stood before Pilate, and as Pilate asked the people time and time again, he said, "I find nothing wrong with this man, Jesus Christ. I want to set him free." The people had an uproar. They said, "No, we want you to crucify him. We want you to crucify him." And then Pilate comes to a point and says, "I find nothing wrong with him. So I'm going to just wash my hands off of his blood. I'm going to wash my hands of the responsibility." And the people in a roar say to Pilate, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." Who would say such a thing? What a terrible declaration to make. And it was those words that sealed the fate, the destiny of that generation, the Jewish people. And what Jesus was saying to the daughters of Jerusalem was, there's a time that is coming that's not far away where what you're seeing is going to pale in comparison to what you're going to experience for yourselves and for your children. Because as you read history, within the 100 years of the death of Jesus Christ, the generation that had stood and made that statement was annihilated by the Roman government. 11 lakh Jews were murdered in the most horrific way. 1.1 million Jews died in the most horrific way possible because they were the generation that said, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." Now, the words that Jesus spoke to the daughters of Jerusalem has significance for us also, because they received that kind of condemnation because they rejected the Son of God and the message that he brought. And I'm telling you, the same fate is reserved for every single person who rejects, who does not receive what God did for humanity through his Son, Jesus Christ. Because the Bible gives a warning of an incident that is about to happen at the end of time. In Revelation chapter 6, the Bible says in verse 15 and verse 16, the Bible says, "Then the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, 'Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb.'" 2,000 years ago, Jesus was the Lamb that carried the sins of the world. But a time is coming where he will be the Lamb that will sit on the throne and he will judge mankind for what it's done. And when we stand before him in judgment, I'm telling you, we better not be like the Jewish generation that said, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." We need to be people who are repentant and say, "I want to receive what you did for me on the cross of Calvary, Jesus Christ." And I think that's why that incident is recorded as a warning for everyone who witnesses and hears about the death of Christ on the cross and then becomes complacent about it.